of researching the Great Wall, as well as the story of William Geil, who passed away 1 century ago and had also spent huge amounts of his life researching the Wild Wall. Tonight's event talks about William Geil, who was born in 1865, died in 1925, the first person to explore and photograph the length of the Great Wall of China. William Lindesay will be the speaker, and we're obviously coming to you from the Yale Center Beijing. A British researcher of the Great Wall and founder of the International Friends of the Great Wall, Lindesay will evoke a journey along the Great Wall in the past and the present, honoring the legacy of William Geil through vivid storytelling, stunning and sometimes startling photographs and videos. This event is co-organized by the RISBJ, the Yale Center Beijing, and the Yale Club. William Lindesay has lived in China for over 30 years, dedicating his life to the exploration, research, and preservation of the Great Wall. He has authored 11 books. I had to check it with him because the last time I looked, it wasn't that many. He's a prodigious and prolific author, and he's written 11 books on the subject, published by major houses, including Harvard University Press, Oxford University Press, and Penguin Viking. He has received several of China's highest honors awarded to foreigners, including the Friendship Award in 1998 and the Beijing Great Wall Friendship Award in 2008. In addition, he was also appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II in 2006. He currently serves as an honorary senior research fellow at the University of Liverpool. I bring you William Lindesay, OBE. Over to you, William.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction, Melinda. And thanks everyone for joining me tonight. Yes, 100 years ago on April the 11th, a certain William Edgar Geil passed away on board a ship between Palestine and Venice. He was with his wife, and I think we can call this an unexpected death. He came down with pneumonia. His wife took his body back to their hometown of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is a stone's throw from Philadelphia, and he was buried there. His wife was so bereaved, she locked all of his belongings in his study. She adopted a little girl, said to be her sister's daughter, because she was so lonely. And that little girl grew up not exploring that locked part of the house. And this is really the story I'm going to tell you tonight. The story of how I first made a journey along the Great Wall, and how William Geil made a journey along the Great Wall 79 years before me. I'll also tell you how we met. I'll tell you how I had the brilliant idea of how we could possibly work together to influence a better future for the wall at a critical time as the new millennium was dawning. And I'll tell you how I found where William Geil had taken his photographs, and how, with the help of the Beijing government and many museums along the whole length of the wall, how we delivered the results in an impactful way with books, exhibitions, and films. So I better get started. Okay. For me, the Great Wall story begins in Wallasey. You've never heard of Wallasey, but it's a ferry ride across from the River Mersey from Liverpool. And I went to school in Wallasey, a very small prep school, and I had a very influential headmaster, the Reverend J.P. Macmillan. I'm sure you can spot him there on the left, but where is William? He is somewhat harder to find. Yeah, I'm on the edge there, back row, beside the lady in the red hat. And it was under the advice of my headmaster, we nicknamed him Mackie, that we had three important books by our bedside, one of which was the Oxford School Atlas. And it was perusing the atlas one evening. I came to a map of China, and I spotted this magical castellated symbol representing the Great Wall. And I used my thumb and finger to try and work out how long is the wall. Because there and then I had decided, when I grow up, I want to go to China and see that wall from one end to the other. And I kept it a secret, but only for a few months. And when I told my headmaster about my secret, he said, "But you know, I don't know anyone who's ever been to China. There's a revolution." Well, I had no idea what a revolution was. And I didn't care. I had my dream, and I kept it secret. And of course, I began to forget it in my teenage years. I wanted to be a zoologist, and then an Egyptologist, and then I became a geologist. And then I returned to the UK on land to work as a lecturer at Manchester Polytechnic. And it's at this time I'm realigned with my dream of the Great Wall, because my two brothers and I, we had our own athletic club. Even today, we still hold the London Marathon record for one generation, 3 members. That's 2:27, 2:39, and 2:59. But one of the most important runs I ever made was along the Roman wall of Hadrian. It's equivalent in age to the Western Han Dynasty wall, so it's about 1800 years old. And soon after that photograph was taken, my brother said to me, as I was munching on a chocolate bar, he said, "Hey, Will, you should go to China and do the same thing on the Great Wall." The timing was perfect. It was 1984. The reforms of Deng Xiaoping had been rolling for 6 years. And me, I was about 28, 29, perfect age for cutting loose. I had no loves or loans to hold me back. And I thought, this is a chance of a lifetime. And I bought a plane ticket to China and arrived here for the first time 39 years ago in March 1986. Everything I carried, apart from my camera, was provided by sponsors, and I had to give them some payback. So I told the local newspaper, the Liverpool Daily Post and Echo, about my plan, and they said, "Perfect, it's the dawn of the year of the tiger, and we will go to the best Chinese restaurant in Liverpool, Europe's oldest Chinatown, and you will learn 2 key things that will help you to your success along the Great Wall. Number 1, use chopsticks. Number 2, learn to say, 'Hello, I'm British.'" But I didn't learn 'Ni hao, wo shi Yingguoren.' I learned Cantonese, so it fell flat. Yeah, on my first afternoon in Beijing, and this is taken kind of a few kilometers up there, it's the Dongdan Chang'an intersection. I made my way to Tiananmen Square to see Chairman Mao and flexed my Cantonese phrase, and it was met with roars of laughter. Okay, I was here to see the wall from end to end, and it wasn't an easy achievement to make. Actually, I was only successful on my 3rd departure in my 2nd year in China. So in 1987, after my so-called China apprenticeship, finding out about, the difficulties of this journey, no maps, areas close to foreigners, the fact that the wall is not a continuous man-made barrier across the north of China. Sometimes natural features were incorporated into the line of the defense. I had no idea until I lost the wall. But I learned a lot that year, and I thought, I've got to have another go. So 1987, I'm back, and I'm starting off from Jiaiguan, and I realized I've got to take a good picture for the UK press. I used a whole black and white film here, and 2.5 months later, one of the shots from that film was used by the Times, putting promise into practice. That refers to a statement I made to my best friend after 3 pints of Guinness, which is a very nice, nutritious black beer, in the Horse and Jockey pub, Chorlton, Manchester. Anyone here from Manchester? Yeah. Okay. So I'm following the wall in the northwest of China, and it's made of rammed earth because, you know, the builders used locally available materials. And I've abandoned my initial plan of bivouacking out, you know, in just a sleeping bag on the desert floor. No, that's not going to work. It's too lonely. No convenience food in the little village. Absolutely nothing like that. So I'm relying on local people, and they become my lifeline as I'm moving through the Hershey corridor of Gansu province. And these people really made my journey a success. And yeah, this is the picture I wanted, because as we know, Deng Xiaoping launched 改革开放, reform and opening up in 1978, nicknamed China's open door policy. But in reality, actually, most of China remained closed to foreigners. There were 325 places open to foreigners in 1987. They were pinpricks on the map. Less than 1% of China's territorial area was open to foreigners. But it's people like this that were way, way ahead of the government in open door policy, because they, on the basis of my sign language, my fragmented Chinese and smiles, they let me into their home. They gave me hot water, they chopped up melons, and they made noodles, and they gave me a place to stay on their kang. And they were the foundation of my success. Well, I didn't take many photographs actually back in those days, because, you know, it's the era of film, and each film had 36 photos. So I was limiting myself really to 3 or 4 photos a day, thinking about a good shot, getting the exposure right. This actually turned out to be a very important photograph. It would end up being on the front cover of my book. But undoubtedly, the most important photograph I took on my journey was this one. And I only took one in this location because it was snowing. And I had 12 seconds to get from my camera on a pile of bricks about 10 meters away down a snowy slope on the wall. And I'm really lucky I didn't go, well, as the New Zealanders say, how would I put that in English? Arse over tit, yes, okay. Well, okay, so I have a great story. Why? I've made a journey of 2,470 kilometers along the line of the wall. I've been on the run for 78 days. I've stayed with farmers, herders, and little work shops, downways, an old person's home for 60 evenings. It's not been an historic foot slog as such. It's been a very exciting journey, because I've been arrested by the police 9 times. I've been deported once, and that entailed a week's detention, confiscation of films, big fine, and of course, get out of China in 7 days. But I got a new passport, new alphanumeric identity, returned, and continued. Well, we've had the physical adventure, and we've had the political adventure, and we've actually got a romantic adventure, because in the course of being deported, I met a beautiful young lady. And as you know, I'm perseverant. 3rd time of asking for her hand in marriage, she eventually said, okay, let's try. That was after 2 months. Well, we're doing quite well, because we've just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary. Yeah. Thank you, thank you. And the British press, well, you know what the British press are like. If you've been to Britain, they're not particularly interested in, you know, history and culture, but they like a good love story. So we were on the biggest TV show on BBC at that time, live from Shepherd's Bush, London, Wogan. 8 million viewers, and she did really well. But it's as a result of this press blitz about my Great Wall journey that I receive a letter, and it's from a lady who has bought my book, but she has a book that's much older, also written by William about the Great Wall. And she says, if it's not too late to be of use, I'd love you to be the owner of this book, because I'm 89. So when I received the book, I remember I unwrapped it and I felt a little bit, I'm not William the Conqueror, I'm William II, because William Geil made the first journey along the wall. It was clear by his photographs, they showed the architectural diversity of the wall from east to west across China. He was the first. I was the second, although he was on horses and then going up to the wall for a bit and then down from the wall, rejoining the horses and the mule train, and I was on foot the whole way, not always on the wall, and of course the police and their efforts to stop me trespassing in closed areas, they took a few hundred kilometers away here and there. But I've made a great journey on foot, and I began to think, rather than competitors, contestants, we are kindred spirits. Same name, same passion. And it was clear William Geil, he was led to China by perusing maps and globes, because he begins his book by writing, there is a Great Wall of China, so the geographies tell us, but they do not make it clear whether it's made of stone or of China, how long it is or how long it has been. Well, I was super impressed by his book, but when I saw one picture, I was absolutely amazed, because it was that nondescript, broken down part of the wall that I photographed under snow that William Geil had photographed, obviously during much better times, weather-wise and in terms of the completeness of the wall. And we'll come to this pairing a little bit later, because it's key in precipitating our cooperation together. But now I want to tell you about William Geil's journey along the Great Wall. He came, as you know, from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and he was a Baptist missionary, and he loved traveling. He was known as one of the most traveled men in the world in the early 1900s. And his first journey in China was down the Changjiang. And he wrote this super humorous, entertaining book called The Yankee on the Yangtze. Yeah, I wonder how the AI deals with that. Okay, how did you translate that, mate? Okay, so Geil is being down the Yangtze River, and in 1908 he decides to come back to China for a journey along the wall. He writes, we think everything begins in Greece and Rome, but what about China? It's time to go and find out something about that great culture. I know from this letter he received from the British Embassy in St. Petersburg, the then capital of Russia, that he had not seen the Great Wall with his own eyes. He wrote to a diplomat at that embassy who had obviously been to China and taken these photographs. And those photographs depict Gubeikou. Those wall fans among the audience will notice on the top frame there, that's the wall coming down from Wuhushan. And there's a couple of towers side by side known as Zimelo, the sister towers. So Geil is going to the wall like with no wall experience at all. And it takes him ages to get to the start point. This is his home in Doylestown. He travels across the US by railroad. Then he hops on a steamer in San Francisco. And over the Pacific Ocean, he writes many letters to his aunt, telling her how seasick he is and how he plans just to go directly to Dagu, which is basically Qinhuangdao, and start his journey early so he can make his journey along the wall and then return to Peking before the start of winter. So he has a big project in front of him because, you know, it's already late May. And he starts his journey at Laolongtou, which in those days had been recently shelled by the British, who landed forces there to relieve the siege on the legation quarter in Peking. And he makes his way with his entourage, usually with some other foreigner in accompaniment, someone usually introduced by the China Inland Mission, you know, this network of churches and missionaries that were operative in China at that time. And as I've said before, he's using horses and mules, and after 81 days, he nears the far western end of the Great Wall. Those of you who are familiar with the Hershey Corridor, familiar with Jiayiguan, you know, on a clear day, you can see to the south the Qilianshan and to the north the Mazongshan. That is a very, very familiar and dear skyline to me. And just poking their heads above the trees on the left-hand side of the picture, those are the gate towers of the Jiayiguan fortress. And that is where William Geil, he couldn't find any accommodation inside the fortress, but he got kind of a shack accommodation just outside, put up his American flag, and of course he had a big story to tell. And he would make his way back along the wall, then sail from Shanghai to London, do a deal with a UK publisher, across the Atlantic to do his deal with a New York publisher, and he became a star, not just in the popular press, not just in front of his audiences, but he was ushered to the White House to see the then President Taft. And he reported, you know, I've been away from China for just 5 years, and the progress has been amazing. And interestingly, he predicts coming cataclysmic conflict between Japan and China. Okay, William Geil, after his Yangtze River and after his historic Great Wall journey, and let me underline the importance of this, he is the first person to make a journey along the wall, documented in a book. The first ever book written about the Great Wall, and the first with the title, The Great Wall of China, belongs to William Geil. And he went back to the States, but he came back to China twice. Once to tour around the 18 ancient capitals of the many dynasties. And then his final journey, the Sacred Five Mountains. The difference between William Geil and me returning to China is I returned to China with my wife Wu Qi after 2 years of life in Britain. We came back in 1990. Unfortunately, we couldn't capitalize on my Great Wall knowledge. I think you know why. Because before 1990, there was a chaotic year. But we came back realizing that 1993 would be the centenary of Mao Zedong's birth, and that would be a great opportunity for me to look at the Long March from the perspective of being on some of those Long March sections on foot, experiencing what Mao and the Red Army experienced in 1934, 1935. And I ended up going to all the places important in Mao's life, from Shaoshan, where he was born, to the mausoleum where he was laid to rest. But I tell you, after 3 or 4 years of Mao Zedong, Leninism, Marxism, and all the isms and all the politics, I was fed up with all that, and I wanted to get back to my dear wall. And now I'm going to have a swig. And I got back to my dear wall by getting a job at China Daily, everyone's favorite newspaper. And I didn't work on Friday afternoons. I rode my giant bicycle to the wall because I had a new plan to document all of the Great Wall in the Beijing municipality, 400 kilometers of it. Yeah, all the archaeological features, trying to understand the military strategy. Yeah. And I took many beautiful photographs, and I came up with this term, wilderness wall. And I came up with my own definition of what the wall is. The building, the surroundings for their archaeological value, villages that contain material taken from the wall, and the people in the villages who have many stories they've heard their fathers and grandfathers tell over the decades. So, yeah, but it was as I got involved in protection work in 1998 that I'm edging closer to the obvious project I should do with William Geil at my side. And I began by picking up garbage, and I'm lucky I had many, many followers. And I became the most famous foreign garbage collector in China. And I got a medal for it from Zhurongji, and the medal even had the Great Wall on it. And then I decided to do a bit more. I founded, as Melinda reminded me, or did someone remind me, I founded International Friends of the Great Wall about 24 years ago. And we got permission from the local government in Huairou to put up this green message signage beside the wall, a first of its kind. And all the time, I'm getting more and more fascinated with vintage Great Wall photographs. And because I'm cycling to the wall every Friday and coming back late on a Sunday, whacked, I realize, I'm really missing my wife and my little baby boy, who is Jimmy, and he's the big daddy with the little boy now. Yeah, okay? So I stumbled across this derelict farmhouse and asked Wuti, my wife, to go out and try and buy it, and we did. And it became my bit of heaven and history. With the wall, 10 of the best 8,851 kilometers of the wall, right outside my window. And on the eve of the millennium, New Year's Eve, December the 31st, 1999, we went out there with a few friends, and that evening we walked up from the farmhouse here to Subolo with a bottle of champagne, ready to see in the millennium. And you can read it here. As I'm walking up to the wall, I see the towers with their windows, known as eyes to the Chinese. Those eyes seem to be looking down on me, approaching. But to me, I was wondering what they had seen over the centuries. You can read it, 1600, 1700, 1800, 1900. And I thought, what are they going to see in the next century? And I was fearful it was going to be disastrous, because ever since we arrived in this valley, I had seen plans on the mayor's table that the wall was going to be rebuilt. There was going to be 4 cable cars. There was going to be a golf course. And the section of wall would accommodate 40,000 visitors a day. And I thought, oh my God, this will be the greatest loss of a Great Wall mountainous landscape in history, unless I and other people can awake the national consciousness to the severity of this threat. And it's at this moment I thought that I could use William Geil's photographs as a baseline, go out and find where they'd been taken, put the old and new side by side, and where does it, oh, maybe, yeah. I was convinced there that night that revisiting the wall with William Geil could help secure a better future for the wall by evidencing how much of it had been lost in the last century. I wanted to harness heartbreak, capture regret, exploit feelings of anger in the hope that these 3 emotions combined would motivate people's minds and muscles to do better for what remained. And that became our 1 century mission. Boom. Okay, was it coincidental photography? I don't think so. I think it was destiny that William Geil and I should become collaborators on our 1 century mission. And I needed help from a lot of people to find these locations. I needed help from Great Wall experts in Beijing. I needed help from people in villages. And so the systematic program to rephotograph the Great Wall began under the provisionary title of The Wall of Two Williams. So now I'm going to just slow down a bit, and we'll make a journey with William Geil and with me in the early part of this century to see how these locations have changed. Some have hardly changed at all. Some I couldn't even find, and some had changed dramatically. So this is Old Dragon's Head, and this is in Lindesay in Hebei. I don't know how I found this, but I was surprised that pinnacle, that one face of a tower, it looks as though it was tottering, survived 100 years. This was quite hard to find as well. And here's where we met. You know that site. There was some low-hanging fruit, because I realized William Geil had passed right through the valley where we had our farmhouse. And I also realized he stayed in the valley at village number 1. And I also realized that the lady who's our caretaker and cooks for us, Lin Mei, surnamed Lin, William Geil stayed with her great-grandfather, that generation, because in his diary he writes, we stayed in Nanjili. The village had 6 families, all with the same surname, and he did the Shramulin character, and then brackets, woods, comma, forest. And this is just a stone's throw. I've been here hundreds of times because it's just a Saturday dawn walk for me at my farmhouse. And this is the famous number 3 between Mutianyu and Jiankou. And this is the famous Sanzoro, now part of Jiankou, rebuilt. And this is Jiankou moving to the west. And you can see on the skyline there, the terrain is getting more dramatic. And this is Lianhuache, where William Geil set off on that day. I really hope in future this can be a Great Wall memorial walk from Lianhuache to Shijiazhe, and then following William Geil out from Shijiazhe over the 9-window tower to Laowaze and Sihai. But who knows? This is Tangzhou in Laiyuan. Ah, yes. Now we come to one of the most dramatic locations, Laiyuan, which William Geil only actually visited on his return from the far west of the wall. But he really lucked out because it was November, and as we all know, November, North China, clear weather, great for photography. So he took these beautiful images, perfectly preserved tower. Yeah. And this was his favorite location. He called it the picturesque pass. He wrote in his book that a photograph fails to capture the serenity of this location. You have to be here for an hour and watch the clouds as they drift across the sky, and watch the shadows that the clouds cast as they move across the wall and the mountains. Well, what a location, a chain of jewels. He loved this location so much, he had part of it embossed on the American edition of his book. But by 1937, because of the Sino-Japanese War, the picturesque pass had become the demolished Watchtowers Pass. And according to locals, the Japanese, they captured Chinese villagers and forced them to destroy the towers. Well, that was a very heartbreaking location. And we move on to Jiayuguan, the famous fortress, and William Geil entering the fortress gate there. You can see the update in the bottom right-hand corner, and various photographs within the fortress, and the famous stele, Tian Xia Shongguan, the martial barrier under heaven, which surprisingly finds its way to America. At least a rubbing does. I don't know whether you've been to Old Dragon's Head. I don't know whether you've been to Diyiduan, and you might think it's an anticlimax, this location. It's just a pile of mud. Couldn't the builders think of something more dramatic than that? Of course they could, because that pile of mud, the remains of a tower, is perched on the brink of a cliff which plunges into the Chilean Gorge. And that is where William Geil and I finished our journey along the wall in the past and the present. But I had collected many other vintage photographs that I wanted to incorporate in my study. And of course, you've got to include Badaling, because every state leader of every nationality, they always go there. And it all began with Richard Nixon in 1972. And that is the VIP section. But other locations were much harder to find. Well, this one, although you can't see it, has a misleading caption. It's actually captioned down there, Shanghai Guan, that's where the wall meets the sea. But of course, we all know there's no such scenery like that there. So I asked Professor Lord Jovin, the eminent Great Wall professor, about this location, and he sent me to Gubeiko. And the first farmhouse I went in, I met Liu Entai, aged 84, and I put a scan of the photo in his hands, and he said, 现在这美楼不在了. Yeah. And he took me to this location, as it had been completely decimated. The oldest photograph I worked with was from 1871, John Thompson, and it's Shuiguan in the Juyong Pass. And of course, the expressway leading to Zhangjiakou had been built right up that valley. But you can't stop progress, eh? Okay, so I have found William Geil's Great Wall. But everywhere I go, everywhere I put up my tripod, I'm thinking, how come I get a letter from the Library of Congress, I get a letter from the Explorers Club and the Pennsylvania Archaeological Museum, and they know nothing about William Geil. They don't have his expedition records, his original photos. I even went to their London publisher, John Murray, a very eminent publishing house in London. They had no record of even publishing this book. Amazing. So my search for William Geil, the man, and his missing materials was always paramount in my mind. What a year 2008 was. The Olympic Games, and many wealthy organizations asked me to go to the wall with them, and I would charge them. And of course, I thought, I can use this money to go to America on the centenary of William Geil's journey and at least lay a wreath on his grave, and maybe put an ad in the local paper. Does anyone know anything about this Doylestownonian, William Geil, first man to trek along the Great Wall? But then, magically, in January and February, I got two amazing emails. You can read them yourself. The one on the left is the result of a mass email shot looking for Geil's adoptive grandsons. And I found one of them. Yeah, Bob Laycock. And he said, I heard my grandfather was a traveler, but I didn't know too much about him. But my brother John, he's the historian. They had no idea William Geil had made such an achievement, nor did they know he was increasingly well known amongst the Great Wall community here in Beijing. And the second email was as a result of my online presence. That's not presence. That's the email on the right from Tim Adamski of the Doylestown Historical Society. And so I went to Doylestown in June 2008, the perfect time to commemorate the centenary of his journey. And I found also on the outskirts of Doylestown a beautiful house. And the amazing thing about this house is even from the gate you can see Chinese writing on the wall. And we all know that writing. Yeah. Tianxia Shungguan, Tian Kai Hai. These are copies of the characters engraved on stones at the west and east end of the Ming Great Wall, respectively. Although I should add, actually Shanhai Guan is not the real eastern end of the wall. I call it the seaside terminus. The real eastern end is Tiger Mountain, Dandong, on the Yalu River. Okay, so there's the original stele, which overlooks Old Dragon's Head. And those are the three brothers. There's Bob, who I found via email. Father John, the historian, who sadly died about 2 months ago. His funeral was last week. And this is the stele that stood outside the western gate of the Jiayiguan fortress. And these are the boxes that Tim Adamski of DHS, Doylestown Historical Society, wanted me to inspect. And it's that one, middle, second from the top, North China. And what gems this box had. Maps, little chitties, paying for the mules and the men, and even, well, in good American fashion, a tip. And his route list. Not in our familiar pinyin transliteration, but using that kind of wonky a century ago, what's it called Wade Giles, and then Chinese characters, and then the distances between and the dates, and all kinds of jottings about bricks and measurements, and the feast he was given by the Mandarin within the Jiayiguan fortress at the conclusion of his journey. It's quite interesting. Sea cucumber, I think he wasn't so keen on that. Oiled chicken, hopefully that was foreigners' favourite of Gung Bao Jiding. Yeah. And then what else do we have? Plum pudding, I think that's maybe Babao Fan. Hao-che. Yes, okay. And a lot of talk about teeth. Apparently the Mandarins had heard that foreigners have false teeth, and they were interested in Geil's teeth. But interestingly, it seems they were not concerned or moved or impressed by how Geil got to Jiayiguan, by following the Great Wall all the way across North China from Shanhai Guan in the east. And so many things in these boxes. And I even saw the desk where William Geil had written his book, and all the press cuttings. Impact. You know, when I set out, I thought if this project was successful, I might get 4 or 5 pages in the South China Morning Post Sunday Color magazine and earn $1,000. But it turned out to be much bigger, and here is some of the coverage. 2个William的长城, Chinese edition of National Geographic magazine. The first exhibition in Shoudu Boguan, so that's, you know, on the main avenue, new museum, ready for the Beijing Olympic year, and we were in the atrium for the opening ceremony, and the Beijing government gave us a magnificent hall, and all the VIPs are there. Yeah, the Professor Law, third from the right, Beatrice of UNESCO, Mayor of Beijing, Sir William Erman from British Embassy, Peng Changxin, head of legislative affairs at the State Administration for Cultural Heritage, and who's that handsome guy in the grey suit? Oh, c'est moi. Okay, yeah, and then the guided tours. And I went down, you know, you think you're not going to have many exhibitions in China, so I went down kind of in disguise a few times to observe the audience, and it achieved just what I wanted it to achieve, because so many Chinese people would stand in front of these photographs and they would sigh. You could hear their regret in seeing the damage that had been done to the wall in the 20th century. And that was what we wanted, because with that feeling, people have an urge, or they pressurize the government into doing what is needed. As we often say, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And actually, 20 years later, basically, in 2025, Great Wall conservation has moved on to alpine heights. There's all kinds of good work going on. There's been a survey. In the Beijing area, there's systematic stabilization. There's archaeological excavation of every tower. There is the idea to have a chain of highly protected areas, a Great Wall National Park per se, and also a Great Wall cultural belt with artifacts that tell the Great Wall story in detail. Well, that's an interesting, many exhibitions since that first one. I think we're up to about 13 now. This one is still running in Gubeikou, outdoors. This was a surreal location. This was the place I was deported from on the last day of May, 1987. And the chief of police saw news about me picking up garbage with volunteers in his newspaper, and he invited me and the family back. And I was made an honorary citizen of Yulin. This was a very, very splendid location inside the Jiayiguan fortress. I could never have imagined, as I set off from there, April the 4th, 1987, that I'd have an exhibition there so many years later. And I still have an exhibition at Jiayiguan at Diyidun, at the underground viewing platform. Well, that's the exhibitions. Books, the first book about the Great Wall, written by a foreigner, translated into Chinese and published in China, and 2 editions. You know, I think what William Geil did was a gift to China. To present a view, a panoramic view of the Great Wall as it stood in 1908, before a succession of damaging events, you know, the chaotic warlord period, the Sino-Japanese War, when the wall became the line in the sand, as it were, to stop the Japanese advance from Manchuria into the heart of China. The Japanese were too strong, but it at least boosted the morale of the people. Yes. As the final episode of my time in Doylestown in June 2008, I felt more than a wreath was necessary. So we had a plaque like this made, and if you go to Doylestown now, you can understand the dash. Of course, we all hope that one subtracted to the other will be a big number and we will live a long and happy life. But folks, don't forget about the content. It's what you make of your time is how you will be remembered, not how long you live. And although it's arrived late, we got a slab of Vermont granite on which to mount that plaque, and my wife and I will see that next month, because, as you know from the beginning of the lecture, this is the centenary of William Geil's death. of course, a sad event, but definitely an occasion at which half of the Two Williams story, should work even harder to have William Geil's legacy more widely known, even in America. Just recently, I had William Geil listed by the Explorers Club as a forgotten explorer. And I will make a presentation at the Explorers Club in June and one at Doylestown Historical Society just after. Well, as you saw in the earlier photograph, I took this book with me. Actually, not this book. This is a different edition because that book is super precious. But when I got back to Beijing, I felt as though the journey of that book, very generously given to me by Marjorie from England in 1991, I thought the story of this book should be added to the book. So I picked up my fountain pen and just wrote what I thought, and luckily it fitted perfectly. I consider William Geil's journey and his book to be a very important milestone in the history of our learning about the Great Wall. So I included it in my selection of the Great Wall in 50 objects. And I never really had the chance to walk with William Geil on the Great Wall, but I often dreamed that we were together in the same places, talking about the same things. He talked about how farmers surrounded him. They were amazed at the size of his boots. And actually, our boot size is exactly the same, 14. And he was taller than me. He wore a Stetson, I wear a Stetson. So I really feel William Geil is not just the first international friend of the Great Wall, he is the father of Great Wall studies. Thank you. I said 55 minutes. Some of you may have noticed there are some things on the table here, just a selection of my collection. William Geil's US British edition of the Great Wall book and his other works on China, and also his biography. A replica of the plaque, which is in the Doylestown graveyard, and a few original photographs, and a flyer about his book, and a beautiful one only photograph of Geil with his Chinese hospitality providers beside a farmhouse with the Great Wall behind. Yeah, and you're welcome to have a look at these, but please don't touch them. Thank you.
Can I take the moderator's prerogative and ask a question? Having studied William Geil's explorations and his writings about them, what do you think was the most memorable encounter that he had along the Great Wall?
There's an episode, it's a scary encounter where he's crossing the Yellow River. Yeah. And the course of the Great Wall, Ming Wall, crosses the Yellow River at 2 points. And he was traveling in summer. And summer is, there's a surge down the Yellow River in summer. So it probably wasn't memorable, but it was certainly dangerous. And he wrote about it in his book, but of course there's no photographs. Yeah. I really like reading the early parts of the book. You can feel his excitement in making his way to China and his fear. And I had exactly those same feelings as I got on a British Airways plane in Manchester coming to Beijing 39 years ago. Yeah, so those are the kind of things that immediately spring to mind. It's the similarities, even though we traveled nearly 8 decades apart.
Thank you. I know many of you have known William, and gone with him up to the wall, and some of you have stayed at the barracks. Why don't you ask some questions that might illuminate what your experiences have been for those who have not been yet with William? Yes, please.
So maybe not a question about the Great Wall at Genco, but so surely there have been some Chinese travels around the Great Wall. Why? I mean, have these been recorded, documented in a way? So I understand it's a military structure, but there must have been something before Western travel.
Yep. I'll tell you a little story. I was at my farmhouse at Genco, and I took my guests up to see the sunrise. Came down, and I'm in the kitchen helping our cook, Lindesay, make the breakfast. And remember, her family's settled in that valley generations before. And she said to me, "Where did you go this morning?" And I said, "We went to Zhongbeilu." And I said, "You must have been there a few times." She says, "Yes." And then I said, "Have you been to Beijing, the place where the wall divides into two?" She said, "No. No, I've not been there." I said, "That's amazing. It's just like 5 kilometers away." And she said, "But it's all the same. It's all the same." And then I said, "Have you been to the 9-window tower?" She said, "No, that's too far. It's not, it can't be good up there." And I think that conversation tells us why the first person to make such a journey comes from the other side of the world. Because, do you know what? The Great Wall of China has an amazing global advertisement. Yeah. Since 1590, it has been marked on world maps. And even throughout the 20th century, the majority of world maps and globes still showed the Great Wall. So it's no wonder people like Geil from Doylestown, William Lindesay from Wallasey, travelled across the face of the earth to the wall. People beside it, to them, if Lindesay is anything to go by, to them, it's just ordinary. It's been there since the day when they're born. It's there when they die. It's nothing special. But certainly, even in Geil's party, there were Chinese. And I have still to research one particular character that I think is very interesting. And hopefully, this June, I can make a breakthrough. Yeah.
Great. But surely one of the most unique things about Geil's journey is that he had the technological means to actually record and document it.
Yes.
Now, obviously, many Chinese may have made this journey, may even have written something that that has been lost or has not been pieced together yet. But they don't have the photographs, which are so
that's right.
crucial to a story.
In fact, in my Great Wall Revisited project, obviously I collected many original photographs and got permissions from various archives and libraries. But basically, the photographs could all be divided into 7 piles. And only one pile was taken by a Chinese photographer. And that was a photographer, Xia Fei, who was used by the Chinese government at the time to counter the Japanese propaganda. Japanese news media put out photographs of their soldiers holding the Rising Sun flag up on the wall, showing they'd conquered China. But China countered that by sending Xia Fei out to take photographs of nationalist troops on the wall, showing the world that Japan is the attacker. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, indeed, technology was important. And Geil carried it's called the 5-pound secretary, 5 pound being 2 kilograms, the 2 kilogram secretary, a portable typewriter. So it would be like the MacBook Air of 1908, Blickensdorfer number 5. But sadly, another piece of sad news from Doylestown, the Historical Society had a fire 2 months ago, and the typewriter and the desk perished in the fire. But thankfully, most of those paper records were stored in a different building, and they've been preserved.
Oh my gosh. And the camera? Was he carrying a 4x5?
It seems not. In fact, miraculously, I have one of Geil's cameras, and I was thinking of bringing it tonight, but it was just too hazardous to pack. But it's, I have a photograph of him with that camera in its case round his neck, and it's got his name and address label on the leather case inside. And that was that's actually a gift from a Chinese colleague he was gifted it in America. And he thought, and he went to Canada and he thought, William in China should be the caretaker of this gem. Yeah.
Fantastic. Alan, I think you had a question just now?
I think you may have partly answered it already about his photographic technique. Was he using plates, and did he travel all along the wall with plates?
Actually, I don't think so. Remember the colour photographs you saw? The colour photographs have a link with Yale. They are housed in the Sterling Library of Yale University. Yeah. And they are magic lantern slides. So, you know, back in those days, there was none of this amazing technology. And I can remember, like 30 years ago, what a headache it was preparing for a lecture. You had to get the transparency in a carousel, upside down, and it would often jam, and the bulb projecting the light was super hot, and if you had the same slide in there for like 2 minutes, suddenly it's melting. But 100 years ago, they had magic lantern slide projectors, and those color pictures are magic lantern slides. And so, yeah, when Wuti and I are in the US, we're going to make a day trip up from New York to see those real things in the library. Should be nice.
Great. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation, William. So I went to Manchester in 2023.
Oh, really?
I visited the Industrial Museum.
Yes.
And of course, Manchester City is a fantastic combination of the history and the modern activity. And then when I was in London, I was just walking around, and I met a young man. He was standing by the riverside to ask for donation to protect the river. Because there used to be the river transportation, but now not so much was happening, but there was a trust that they were still cleaning it to make it more healthy. And then these days in Beijing, of course, the Liangma River, and it's like really become more activity, like people are boating there, and they have lights. So my question to you is, considering everything you've done, the research, the Great Wall studies, do you see China in terms of the protecting the city heritage and to become, you know, a modern city, but also continue all those functions of the architecture? Do you see the government is putting a lot of efforts there? Thank you.
Yeah. I've kind of swung a bit this way and that in the last couple of decades. I think there was a lot, you know, when the Olympic Games bid was won by Beijing, the slogan for the Games was New Beijing, Great Olympics. And I witnessed that, and any of you old enough, you remember everywhere was a building site. And I think some of the fabric of old Beijing, you know, the hutongs and the sihuan, were lost at that time. But on the other hand, whenever I went down a hutong, you know, it's like, oh God, what a stink. Yeah, you didn't have to live there. So, you know, it's that conflict between preserving and making life more comfortable for people. Not an easy job for any government, especially in China when the population is so great. So overall, I think the Beijing government has done very well. And I'm super impressed by the amazing improvements in the environment, especially the air. The Great Wall, the future of the Great Wall, I was very pessimistic when I was doing this work between 2003 and 2007. Very pessimistic. Because at that time, Great Wall conservation was deemed to be rebuilding, UNESCO plaque, cable car, and that's Great Wall conservation. The officials didn't seem to realize that beyond the maybe 10 sections of tourist wall, there were thousands of kilometers of wilderness wall. I think people were sleepwalking to the fact that once the car industry became a pillar industry of China, that would give people the mobility to access thousands of kilometers of wilderness wall, which I dubbed to be a museum without a curator. So I think the rephotography project at that time was a very key delivery. And also, I should say, I did some things behind the scenes, working in collaboration with the Beijing Bureau for Cultural Heritage. We had the Great Wall landscape of the Beijing municipality listed by World Monuments Fund as one of the most 100 endangered sites, both in 2002 and 2004. It was hardly in the Chinese press, but government circles knew, and I think it added to the urgency to promulgate laws, the first provincial level administrative laws to protect a specific genre of cultural relics, Beijing protecting the Beijing Wall. So super progress in the last 20 years though, amazing. I'm absolutely stunned. And I feel as though my job is over. The job of William Geil and I and my volunteers picking up garbage was to awaken the national consciousness that don't think the Great Wall made of stone and brick on the mountains will defend itself, because all kinds of crazy development plans, all kinds of things can damage the wall, even too many footprints. So tough, but really optimistic now. Thank you. Yes.
So William, thanks for the great speaking. I think it's. You guys hear me? Oh, I have to press it. Okay, so you raised a very interesting point, although you didn't get much into it, is that you were pursued by police.
Yeah.
20 years ago, and even deported once. Obviously, what you did at the time is officially against the law, right? Because you're traveling into those regions.
Yeah.
20 years now, 20 years out, 20 years later now, there's still a lot of, as you said, the government protecting the wall, the effort is there. Everyone can see, especially the people who've been to the war, the wilderness war, as you said, can tell that they've done a lot of work, building it up, protecting it and everything. But they uniformly ban people from going on the unopened section of the wall. What's your view of that? There are a lot of people still want to go there. I think a lot of people, maybe not necessarily in the same spirit as you, but they wanted to see the great heritage, the great work of the ancient people, and these are all people's property in a way. But they're it's like the ban is quite simplistic and brutal. So how do you see that?
It's like a blanket policy. Yeah, definitely a big contradiction. When those laws came in more than 20 years ago, my first thought was, if you make the Great Wall forbidden, people will not have the opportunity to appreciate its majesty, its scale. It's a building like no other on the face of the earth. And also, certainly, I would say year on year, season on season, there are more people going to Wild Wall in the Beijing area in Hebei than ever before. This shows us that these people, the majority of them are pretty well educated, white-collar workers, stuck in offices Monday to Friday. They're not interested in conventional tourism, go to a place, tickets, souvenir stalls, blaring music. They want recreation, inspiration, upliftment, and they get that in the mountains of Beijing and Hebei, the mountains crowned by the wall. However, not everyone going to Wilderness Wall behaves responsibly. For 10 years, International Friends of the Great Wall operated a ranger system in Shijiazhi. It was very difficult, but we got funding for 6 farmers. And the old ones worked very well, the younger ones didn't work so well. I realized what a headache it actually is checking up on people's work. But it made that section of wall famous, not only for its beauty and its danger, but also for its cleanliness. And in a way, that was a bit of a, you know, what would you call that? That was counter to what we were doing. We were not trying to clean up after people. We were trying to make people realize this is beautiful, and I don't want to be the first to put any garbage here. And then when the financial crisis struck, we didn't have the funding. I actually continued to pay the farmers for about 6 months because it's hard to tell farmers you don't have a job, and I can't afford to pay them 350 yuan a month. But I managed to pay them for about 6 months, and then I said, I'm using, you know, the family silver. And then we let things go, and oh, the garbage became awful, awful. And then other groups would be active for a while, but I think at this time you get an improvement in people's attitudes. Certainly the hiking groups became pretty self-policing. You know, you would see people with a little plastic bag of garbage as they're coming down the mountain. The photographers, because many of the photographers were the older ones, 50, 60, and they were brought up in the era that the government does everything. They tended to be quite a problem, but the biggest problem were the people would go out there in the street shoes, the white shirt, the black pants, the plastic bag, and a Beijing Qinnianbao on the ground, and let's have a picnic, and you just see a circle of garbage. And it was at its worst at Wuyi and Shi. And I wrote about this in my book, The Genko Years. All these stories are there for historical documentation. So it's a tough one, but for 20 years, everywhere I've been talking to officials, I've been saying the future of Great Wall tourism is the walkway. The walkway, wherever you are. Laolongtou to the town, to Jiaoshan, that's a walkway of 2 days. Jiayiguan, Taolaihe Fortress, 7-kilometer walkway. Beijing, walkways in Huairou, in Yanqing. I've been saying this for 20 years, and it's been falling on deaf ears until exactly 1 year ago. The Yanqing District Great Wall Cultural Festival. It was a presentation by a Bujang. He'd just been to Hong Kong, and he said, me and my colleagues, we walked the McLehose Trail, and we saw these panels which introduced the geology and the flora and the history as you went along. And now I'm planning a similar Great Wall Way in Yanqing, and it's going to be 160 kilometers long. And finally, I hope I live to walk those Great Wall Ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad that we could end on this upbeat note and note the progress that William has experienced, because a couple of decades ago, has it really been that long? In my day job, I'm a journalist, and I had written a cover story for Newsweek magazine,
The late great
The
wall.
Late Great Wall,
Yeah.
with an image of, it looked like a ribbon of people.
Yeah.
It was, you could barely see the wall. There were so many people crowding onto the wall. It was like this sinuous stream
And
of
all
people.
the conflicts at Huanghuachang,
Yes.
rocks being thrown, stairways into towers being destroyed so farmers could put up wooden ladders to take 5 yuan, and so on and so on and so on. It's all in the Wild War book.
And I'm
This is-
so glad that, at least for now, at least for this period of time, we can say it's better.
It's
A little
much
bit
better, yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks
to the Yale Center Beijing.
Thank
you,
you.
William. And please come up and enjoy the books. There are even some for sale, I think, and they're all great. And the rare books, they've taken a lot of energy to bring them here so that we could see them. Thanks so much.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
你好呀，这位朋友帮助我吧，我得跟这个老师照张相。好，谢谢。
You're welcome.
这个是关于这个故事。
需要的话喊我。
这个病人他最近。
Ooh. Of course, yes.
好，看这里。好，拍了好多。
Thank you. 谢谢。
Before everyone gets away, we take picture of these.
Yeah.
It's my gift.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I love pandas. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
For the talk.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. There are. You know.
成这样，我就能
That's
听。
me. That's us.
Yeah.
Where I wrote to you.
Charles, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take one here. That's,
Yeah.
So that.
I'm trying to turn this off.